A Peaceful Morning in Yemen. October 12, 2000, the harbor of Aden, Yemen, shimmered under the late morning sun as the USS Cole, DDG-67, an advanced Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyer, quietly pulled into port for a scheduled refueling stop. Life on board was calm. Sailors in their early 20s moved about casually, enjoying a break from open-sea operations. Some penned emails to family, others chatted over coffee or played cards, thinking only of their next deployment task or what movie would be screened in the mess that evening. Then, at precisely 11:18 a.m., that peace was obliterated. A small, unassuming fiberglass boat approached the Cole's port side. The two men aboard smiled and waved, giving no reason for alarm. In a split second, a thunderous explosion tore through the ship's midsection, instantly killing 17 sailors and wounding 39 more. The blast gouged a 40-foot hole into the destroyer's steel hull, sending water rushing into compartments and triggering chaos below decks. Smoke, fire, and screams filled the corridors. Young sailors, many just out of high school, found themselves thrust into a nightmare, crawling through shattered bulkheads to rescue their shipmates. Damage control teams fought to contain flooding and stabilize the vessel, while medics treated the wounded amid choking smoke and broken steel. The calm morning had become a scene of horror and heroism. The Cole bombing was the deadliest assault on a U.S. Navy ship since the 1987 attack on the USS Stark. It shocked the nation and raised urgent questions about force protection, intelligence lapses, and the growing reach of terror networks. Behind the attack stood Al-Qaeda, testing American resolve in a strike that would eerily foreshadow the horrors of September 11, 2001. But even in devastation, the crew of the Cole showed unwavering resilience. They kept the ship afloat. They carried their fallen brothers and sisters with dignity. They returned home draped not in defeat, but in honor. This is the story of the USS Cole, a tale of betrayal in broad daylight, of young lives taken too soon, and of a crew whose courage lit a beacon in one of America's darkest hours. The target, why the USS Cole. A ship of pride. The USS Cole, DDG-67, wasn't just another warship, it was a symbol. Named after Marine Sergeant Darrell S. Cole, a Medal of Honor recipient who died heroically at Iwo Jima, the destroyer carried with it a legacy of courage and sacrifice. Sleek, powerful, and outfitted with cutting-edge Aegis combat systems, the Cole was a jewel of the U.S. Navy's fleet, tasked with patrolling volatile waters as part of America's growing counter-terrorism presence in the Middle East. By October 2000, the ship had completed missions in the Mediterranean and was en route to the Persian Gulf. It needed fuel to continue its journey, leading to a planned refueling stop in the port of Aden, Yemen. Aden, Yemen, a trap. Unknown to most on board, Aden wasn't just a pit stop, it was a trap. Yemen had become a quiet haven for extremists. Al-Qaeda, under the direction of Osama bin Laden, had infiltrated local institutions, paid off officials, and scoped out vulnerabilities in Western military routines. The U.S. presence in the region was deeply resented, and the port of Aden, with its chaotic oversight and lax security, was the perfect hunting ground. The Cole presented a golden opportunity. During refueling, a destroyer is at its most exposed, engines powered down, radar focused elsewhere, crew members in relaxed routines. Even its defenses were at half readiness. Bin Laden's operatives knew this. They had studied similar attacks, such as the 1987 strike on the USS Stark, and used every lesson to maximize lethality. In the days leading up to the bombing, a team of suicide bombers made their final preparations. They knew exactly when the Cole would arrive. They knew how close they could get before raising suspicion. And most chilling of all, they knew the sailors on board would likely wave back as the boat approached. What looked like a friendly civilian vessel was, in fact, a floating bomb, packed with C4 explosives and steered by men ready to die. The stage was set. The trap was in place, and the Cole, a ship of pride and honor, had unknowingly sailed into the jaws of terror. The attack. The last thing I saw was fire. The suicide boat. It was a calm morning, until death came disguised in a smile. Two men, later identified as Ibrahim al-Thawr and Abdullah al-Misawa, motored a small fiberglass boat toward the USS Cole. Dressed as local fishermen, they waved casually at the sailors aboard, appearing as nothing more than curious bystanders. But hidden within their vessel was over 500 pounds of C4 explosives, packed with precision, wired for maximum devastation, and blessed by Al-Qaeda as a martyrdom mission. As they drew close, the sailors barely had time to process what was happening. 11:18 a.m. With the hull just feet away, the terrorists triggered the detonator. The blast. The explosion was apocalyptic. A fireball erupted from the waterline, ripping a 40-foot gash in the port side of the destroyer. The ship rocked violently, throwing sailors through the air like rag dolls. The blast's shockwave shattered windows in buildings across Aden, and a column of smoke curled skyward like a signal of war. Seawater poured into the engine room. Electrical systems failed. Fires broke out across multiple decks. Below, the galley, where many sailors had gathered for lunch, was obliterated. Some never stood a chance. Heroes in the inferno. Amid the chaos, heroism burned brighter than the flames. Chief Petty Officer John Rupp, covered in second-degree burns, crawled back into the smoke-filled mess hall, pulling out injured crewmates one by one. Lieutenant Chris Peterschmidt, bleeding from multiple shrapnel wounds, refused medical treatment and organized emergency response teams, directing fire control and damage assessment. Seaman James McDaniels made the ultimate sacrifice. Realizing that flooding would spread if a bulkhead wasn't sealed, he slammed the hatch closed, knowing it would trap him on the wrong side. He drowned, saving dozens. For nearly 48 hours, the battered crew of the Cole worked around the clock, fighting fire, sealing ruptures, and pumping out water to keep their ship afloat. They would not let her sink. The aftermath. A Navy, in mourning, the fallen 17. When the smoke cleared and the fires were finally extinguished, the reality of the devastation struck like a second wave. 17 sailors, sons, daughters, brothers, sisters, were gone. Most of them were barely out of their teens, their military careers just beginning. They had signed up to serve their country, not to be ambushed in a foreign port on a peaceful morning. Among the fallen, Seaman Lakiba Nicole Palmer, 22, a bright and driven young woman who had dreams of becoming a naval officer. She was one of the first African-American women to serve aboard the Cole. Signalman Seaman Sharon Louis Gunn, 22, a dedicated sailor known for his infectious smile. The son of a retired Marine, he was proud to follow in his father's footsteps. Fireman Gary Graham Swenchonis Jr., 26, a Texas native with a strong work ethic and deep love for his family. He had written just days earlier about how excited he was for the next port of call. Their names, along with those of the 14 others, are now permanently etched into the black granite of the Navy Memorial in Washington, D.C. A silent roll call of courage and sacrifice. A nation shaken. Across the United States, flags flew at half-staff. Memorials were held in hometowns from North Carolina to California. Grieving families received folded flags, official condolences, and the unbearable weight of loss. But amid the sorrow came difficult questions. How could this have happened? Many experts believe that America's measured response sent a dangerous message, that terrorism could strike with impunity. In the minds of bin Laden and his followers, the Cole was a test, and the lack of retaliation a green light for something bigger. That something would come less than a year later, on the morning of September 11, 2001. The legacy, a warning, unheeded, the USS Cole's return. After 14 long months in dry dock, the USS Cole was reborn, not as the sleek warship that had once glided silently through international waters, but as a scarred veteran of war. Painstakingly repaired at a cost of over $250 million, the Cole rejoined the fleet in 2002. Painted on her hull was a thick black stripe, a permanent mark of mourning and remembrance, one that whispered the names of 17 sailors who never came home. Sailors serving aboard her afterward did so with pride, and with the solemn duty of carrying on the legacy of those lost. The Cole was no longer just a destroyer. She had become a floating memorial, a symbol of sacrifice and survival. The fight for justice for the Cole was slow, complicated, and for many, incomplete. One of the key plotters, Jamal al-Badawi, evaded prison more than once after being captured in Yemen. He was finally killed in a U.S. drone strike in 2019, nearly 2 decades after the bombing. The alleged mastermind, Abd al-Rahim al-Nashiri, was captured in 2002 and remains in Guantanamo Bay, embroiled in a drawn-out military trial process. To this day, he has not been convicted, a point of frustration for the families of the victims. And the questions go deeper. Where did the funding come from? Many families believe Saudi Arabia, where 15 of the 9/11 hijackers also came from, played a role, whether through direct funding or willful blindness to extremist elements. Lawsuits have been filed, documents declassified, but the full truth for some remains agonizingly out of reach. A foreshadowing of 9/11. The bombing of the Cole was not just an act of terror, it was a warning, bright and flashing. The attackers used suicide tactics, civilian disguises, and intimate knowledge of U.S. military behavior. They studied past operations and executed with precision. The same techniques, surprise, proximity, symbolism, would later be used on September 11, 2001, when Al-Qaeda launched its most devastating assault. The Cole was a test, and America's response, measured, cautious, diplomatic, was seen by bin Laden not as strength, but as weakness. Could a stronger reaction in 2000 have disrupted the chain of events that led to 9/11? That haunting question has echoed through congressional hearings, intelligence briefings, and the minds of grieving parents and spouses for more than 2 decades. A lesson etched in steel. Today, the USS Cole continues to serve, not just as a ship, but as a warning. She reminds us that complacency invites catastrophe, and that evil often strikes when we least expect it. Her steel may be repaired, but the loss, the lessons, and the legacy remain unbroken. Epilogue. We remember. The bombing of the USS Cole is no longer just a headline in history books. It is a solemn chapter etched into the soul of a nation. It is a lesson in vigilance, that terror doesn't announce itself. It hides behind smiles, beneath the waves, and in the ordinary moments we take for granted. The morning of October 12, 2000, was peaceful, until it wasn't. It is a lesson in courage. Young sailors, many barely out of high school, were thrust into fire and chaos. Some ran into smoke-filled compartments, some sealed doors to protect others, some never escaped. All stood firm. In those terrifying moments, heroes were not born. They were revealed. And it is a lesson in memory, for as long as the Cole sails, and as long as we speak the names of the 17 who perished, they are not forgotten. Their sacrifice is not just marked in stone at memorials. It lives on in the heartbeat of the Navy, in every watch stood, every flag raised, and every mission launched in their honor. The Cole sails still, not in defiance, but in remembrance. Final thought. The sea remembers its own, and America remembers the Cole. 17 lives lost, dozens wounded, a nation changed. The bombing of the USS Cole was not just an attack, it was a warning, one that history cannot afford to forget. Thank you for watching this story of bravery, loss, and resilience. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe to keep these powerful moments of history alive. Drop a comment below to honor the heroes of the Cole. And remember, the sea remembers its own, and so must we. Subscribe for more real-life military history. Like, comment, share. Next up, the SAS Iranian Embassy Siege. 17 minutes that changed the world.